Good morning, this is Tyler Dawn Rosenquist of the Ancient Bridge, and today I want to talk to you about something that sounds boring but really isn't. It's dyadic social identity. And I guess this could be subtitled, Were Ancient Women Really as Oppressed as we think they are, especially in ancient Israel? Did they feel oppressed? So let's talk about dyadic social identity. Now, ancient peoples were not individualistic. Most of our inability to properly relate to the Bible peoples comes down to a lack of knowledge of honor-shame dynamics and a lack of understanding of dyadic community mindset. Now, honor-shame culture tells us that there is only so much good reputation to go around. It's a zero-sum economy, and everyone has to share from a limited honor pool. Therefore, if I have more honor, renown, fame, good reputation, then you have less. I had to get mine from somewhere. And if I have more than my fair share, it means you probably have less than your fair share. In the Western world, we're an innocence, guilt-based society. And everyone can have a good reputation as long as they live their lives with integrity. We don't understand this, but this is something that Yeshua, Jesus, changed. He kind of upended the ancient ideas about what honor was all about and what honor looked like in the eyes of the Father. So we owe a lot of our modern ideas about honor, we owe to Yeshua. Of course, we've taken it a little too far, but that's for another teaching. In the ancient world, and even in the majority of the world today, honor is about how much you are respected, how much authority and power you have, how your accomplishments rank with other people's accomplishments. It's not necessarily connected to any sort of inner integrity. As a matter of fact, they weren't very introspective at all. They looked at emotions as their enemies. Often in Bible times, they were determined not to be under the control of their emotions. Emotions were something to be dealt with, but not something to be led by. Absolutely not. That is also something very modern. Now, individualism, of course, is what the Western world is about, and we consider it to be a virtue. Western cultures are focused on emotions as positive and personal fulfillment as the goal of life. We do not see ourselves as family and group entities, first and foremost, but as unique individuals yearning to fill our personal destinies, okay? Individualism, by its nature is very self-focused and geared towards the achievement of personal goals at any cost. If a person doesn't realize their dreams, we often look at that as being tragic. They feel their life was wasted, no matter if their children grew up to be wonderful people, or if they didn't go and do that one thing that they dreamed of, they consider their life to be wasted. And one of the reasons, because they just valued others, okay? They valued their place in society. When we're held back in any ways, individualistic people are liable to become despondent or angry, or consider themselves to be oppressed, okay? Because individualistic people, that word, hate to be told that they can't do something, even if that something is damaging to society, or if not doing that something would be beneficial to society. The people of the Bible, on the other hand, were dyadic, okay? They thought and functioned as members of a group structure. Everyone, men and women, they had clearly defined roles and prohibitions on dress, behavior, and the space they were allowed to be in during the day. Men were not welcome in the sphere of women, and women were not welcome in the sphere of men. It went both ways. There were jobs for women and there were jobs for men, and because of this, the families functioned very well and needs always got met. Unless there was a famine, but we're not going to go there. Men didn't yearn to do women's jobs and women didn't yearn to do men's jobs. When you were identified as part of a dyadic society, you were identified in terms of how you related to other people. You were the son of somebody, or you were the wife of somebody. Mary and Martha. Okay, Mary and Martha are identified as the sisters of Lazarus, which means that, one, their father was probably dead, and two, they were probably widows because they weren't being identified as a husband, or they were too young to be married. Don't know, but as Mary had a big expensive jar of perfume, I'm assuming she was an older widow. So, dyadic people aren't yearning to do things outside of their natural, what they consider their natural God-given sphere, because dyadic people are always completely relying on their societal feedback to tell them who they are, what they should be doing, and how well they're doing it. A dyadic person cannot exist by themselves because they won't have anyone to tell them who they are and what their function is. And in an individual society, we're very tempted to look at that as a weakness or as lame or pathetic. But it's not. It was how people in survival societies had to function. People couldn't go off on their own and do their own thing, or there would be chaos. Families, communities would be thrown into chaos. They would be unpredictable. And in a society without technology, without stores down the road and telephones and everything, having unpredictable lives meant death. Okay, so dyadic is not weak. Dyadic is strength in survival-based communities. Okay, so a dyadic person has no concept of self outside the social group. And the individualistic person has trouble generally functioning as a member of a group. Dyadic people are hierarchical and readily submit to authority without feelings of resentment or worthlessness or inferiority. Whereas individualistic people tend to resent authority, any authority other than their own. The more dyadic a person is, the happier they are and more contented they are as a cog in the machine, seeing their worth as that cog and defining their worth as how well they function as that cog. Okay? The more individualistic a person is, the more they are unhappy unless they're the person with the hand on the switch that's making the rest of the machine go. Okay, does that make sense? A dyadic person does not question their worth in society, nor do they question the worth of their work within their social group. Individualistic people are often saying, why on earth am I here? What's in it for me? What's my destiny? What do I need to do before I die so that my life will have been worthwhile, so that I make my mark? Individualistic people want to make their mark. Okay? They want to control. They don't want to be controlled. They want people to submit to them. They don't want to submit to people. All right? So, modern Western people reading the Bible, especially women and misogynistic men, mistake this social mindset of servanthood, okay, for ancient and biblical female oppression. But nothing could be further than the truth, okay? Misogynistic men assume that keeping a woman at home required women to be under the thumbs of men, okay? And women often assume that women were being kept at home against their will, that they didn't want to be wives, they didn't want to be mothers, that they didn't want to be functioning as women. In truth, men and women were taught to find their sense of worth in serving their community according to their assigned gender roles. And their value in society was not based upon being male or female, but upon how honorably they served the social group in their important assigned functions. Okay, it was all about role. It was all about functioning in that role to the best of your ability. It was very, very, we would call that noble. It was the setting aside of what we would consider self and living as part of a community. You know, that was why the first century believers could sell everything they have and live like that, and we can't. And when we try, it turns out like communism. Because communists are still individuals, okay? Communism is a very individualistic form of socialism, okay? It's why socialism doesn't work, because we're individuals. True socialism only works in a dyadic community, in a true dyadic community. But even with, you know, a dyadic community, you still have kings, and you still have, so it doesn't ever really work. So never mind, you know, bad example. So dyadic people think in terms of stereotypes. And they don't seem to have any problem with it whatsoever. They have no problem with saying all cretins. Cretins are liars. You know, Paul was quoting, you know, the literature of the day, but they believed they didn't have any problem with saying all Samaritans are evil and all Galileans are uneducated, scruffy-looking nerf herders. I might have added that last part. When Yeshua would say, "Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees," he was speaking in terms of a stereotype, stereotyping a group. It was never meant to mean that every single Pharisee and every single scribe was an evil hypocrite. Stereotypes. Stereotypes. And when the Judeans said that Galileans were all uneducated, well, it wasn't true. It was a stereotype, okay? They talk about the Pharisees and the elites would talk about the people of the land. And they had definite feelings about them, and they weren't really good. Everybody thinks good about their own group and bad about everybody else's. Nothing ever changes. Nothing ever changes. Okay, now our problem is that we cannot imagine anyone not being individualistic. But individualism is a relatively new mindset. Individualism was impossible in a survival-based society which described all people. Okay, so in a dyadic society, they are focused on surviving now. Okay, they're focused on community. They're looking at the present and they're looking at the past. What's been done. They feel that they're at the mercy of nature, and they believe their position in society is God determined. And they're for instant gratification. If you've got a lot of food now, you eat it now. You don't store it up. Now, individualistic societies believe in not just surviving, but doing something to make survival more pleasant, more doable. It's why individualistic societies are more technologically advanced than dyadic societies. Individualistics are self-centered. They're not community-centered. They're self-centered. They look to the future. What am I going to be doing 10 years from now? What am I going to be doing? What did Yeshua said? Don't worry about the future, what you'll be wearing and what you'll be drinking and eating, because the Father knows you need these things. Okay? And individualistic people don't believe they're at the mercy of nature. They want mastery over nature. Okay? And instead of instant gratification, individualistic people are often very into deferred gratification. Okay, well, I've got extra money this month. I'm not going to blow it. I'm going to put it aside for savings because next month the money may not be there. Okay, completely different mindsets. And which brings us to Joseph. Why was what Joseph proposed to Pharaoh so mind-blowing? Now, in the normal scheme of things, the dyadic people of Egypt would have just taken those years of plenty and they would have gorged themselves and they would have sold the grain to every nation or the face of the earth. They wouldn't have been putting it away. Joseph changed the whole paradigm. And he said, okay, we need to put a fifth away from every year. So we will have it when the years of famine came. That's why Joseph saved the whole world, because no one in the whole world was putting away their bumper crop, because everybody was getting a bumper crop, but no one else but Egypt was putting it away. Very cool, but very indicative of dietic society. Okay, now Joseph wasn't operating as an individual; he was still operating as in a community, but he was looking at it from more of an individualistic, deferred gratification mindset.